There's a type of happiness that looks good, but feels empty. It's the happiness of performance. Smiles on the outside, protection on the inside. Chuck Palahniuk writes a line that cuts straight through that illusion. The only way to find true happiness is to risk being completely cut open. Not literally, psychologically, because cut open is what vulnerability feels like. Being seen, being honest, being real, without armor. Tonight, we're going to unpack this in a grounded way. How vulnerability becomes a doorway to peace, connection, and meaning. And how to do it without destroying yourself. Because true openness includes boundaries. Armor is what we build when we've been hurt. We learn, don't show too much, don't need too much, don't care too much. And the armor works. It reduces pain. But it also reduces joy. Because joy requires contact. Real contact requires risk. And risk requires openness. If you never risk being seen, your life becomes controlled, but not connected. Predictable, but not alive. That's why the quote is unsettling. It says, you can't keep your heart fully protected and fully happy at the same time. Here's the psychological reality. Vulnerability feels like threat. Not because you're weak, because your nervous system is doing its job. When you open up, your brain predicts danger, rejection, shame, abandonment, loss of control. So the goal is not to stop fear. The goal is to understand fear. Fear is not always a warning that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a signal that something is real. And the deeper the truth you carry, the louder the fear when you finally speak it. Most people aren't unhappy because life is empty. They're unhappy because they keep editing themselves. They say, I'm fine, when they're not. They say, it doesn't matter, when it does. They say, I don't need anything, when they do. That constant self-editing creates a split, a public self, and a hidden self. And hidden selves don't feel happy. They feel lonely. To risk being cut open is to stop bargaining with reality. This is what I feel. This is what I want. This is what I fear. This is what I need. Not as drama, as clarity. This is crucial. Vulnerability without boundaries becomes exposure, and exposure can become trauma. True vulnerability is selective. It chooses safe containers. You don't open your deepest wounds to people who weaponize them. You don't hand your heart to someone who keeps dropping it. So the quote is not asking you to be naive. It's asking you to be brave and wise. Cut open means allow honesty, but also protect what is sacred. Because happiness doesn't require you to bleed for everyone. It requires you to stop bleeding in silence. A lot of happiness is relational, not because you need people to complete you, but because you need people to witness you. When you are truly seen and still accepted, something heals. The nervous system relaxes, the identity stabilizes, the shame loses power. But you don't get that by being perfect. You get it by being honest. And that's the paradox. The things you hide to avoid rejection often become the reasons you feel disconnected. So yes, risk. Not reckless risk. relational risk, the risk of being real. Sometimes happiness doesn't arrive because you're missing something. It doesn't arrive because you're still holding something. An old identity, an old story, an old role you no longer fit. Being cut open is uncomfortable because it exposes what must change. And change always feels like loss first, even when it's growth. But the moment you stop protecting the old version of you, a new kind of happiness becomes possible. The happiness of alignment, when your life matches your truth. You don't become open overnight. You become open by practice. Small honesty, small requests, small boundaries, small confessions of truth. Each one trains your brain. I can be seen and survive. I can be honest and still be safe. That's how true happiness becomes reachable. Not by one dramatic exposure, but by repeated, deliberate, compassionate openness. So, let the quote be a mirror. If you want true happiness, you can't hide forever. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. You can't connect while staying sealed. The only way to find true happiness is to risk being completely cut open. Not to be harmed, but to be real. Because the life you're proud of is usually the life where you stopped performing and started living.